it's noise that is bred about insecurity about, am I good enough to do this? We're all good enough. The only difference between where you are and I am isn't ability, it's practice.
Welcome to the Scriptcake podcast. I am your host, Lavinder Gill, and I am truly excited to have one of my dear friends, Bill True, on the podcast this week. Bill is an amazing screenwriter. He's had a screenplay be a semi-finalist at the Nichols Fellowship that ended up getting made into this fantastic movie called Runaway. It won the Austin Film Festival. He's got a ton of projects in the works, and he is also the department chair and head of dramatic writing at the Scottsdale School of Film and Theater. Welcome to the Scriptcake podcast, Bill.
Thank you. That sounds good. I like that guy. That guy sounds impressive. I don't know who that man is.
That man is impressive. And, I always love to hear an origin story. And I think a lot of screenwriters kind of want to know, how does someone go from wanting to be a screenwriter, working on something in a room alone, to actually having that as a career and working in the industry? Bill, can you tell us how you found your way and navigated your way to where you are?
I just got back from the Austin Film Festival, as you know, because we saw each other at the conference. And, one of the things I tell writers all the time there is, if there is a story about how to do this wrong, I've hit all of the beats. Mm-hmm. I got a late start. I didn't live in the right city. I wasn't a very good writer. I didn't think I was a good writer. In fact, most of my life, adult life, has been marked by me running away from writing, and so, it's by, I don't know, the grace of God almost, and tenacity, right, and sticking with it and practice that. That I've been able to really carve out this, really, I just feel so fortunate, like this really beautiful writer's life. And it's the thing so the origin story is, ever since I was 3 or 4 years old, I wanted to do this. I didn't know what a writer was at that time, but I'm old enough to remember when Star Trek was on TV the first time. Mm-hmm. Then the first movie I ever saw in the movie theater was, this is going to be a big surprise to you, Lavinder, because you're a friend of mine, was Planet of the Apes.
What?
Believe it or not, I know. Straight and as I'm staring at in my office the Planet of the Apes shrine wall, and and I don't have them here, but I have all this Planet of the Apes paraphernalia around my office, but I remember. And also, as a bit of a precocious child, so I started to read when I was 3, and I remember seeing these words on the screen at the end of Star Trek, and the title card was created by Gene Roddenberry. Mm-hmm. And my sister at the time, well, she's still my sister, but my sister said to me, "That's the guy that made it." And so I had this idea of a story maker, and it was the first time when I realized, oh, those were people pretending. And somebody made up that story, and those adults were pretending something. And I'd done that before. I'd seen that before. I remember watching Planet of the Apes, and I realized those weren't real monkeys; those were people, And a story maker did that too. Didn't realize one of those story makers was one of my great heroes, Rod Serling, at the time. But I knew that story makers had done that too, and so the dream started then. Like, I just knew that I wanted to do that. No matter what, I knew that I wanted to, and really make TV more than movies, because, I'm a child of the 70s and 80s, especially the 70s, because those are my formative childhood years, and grew up watching television. And so I was like, if I could do that for the rest of my life, I would be happy. And then life happened. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, I wish that I could say that my career was, like the deciding factor of my career was, like, I always, like, people told me I couldn't do something, and I was like, I won't say the F word, but it's like, no way, I'm going to do it anyway, but I didn't. It's like people told me, like, I was like, I tried writing things and people told me I wasn't good at it, and I believed them. So, but the one thing that I was good at was acting and singing. And, you know, I grew up in a musical family. I played in my parents' country western band all through high school. I sang. That's just what I did. And now the interesting thing is in my right before my senior year of high school, I guess as I started my senior year of high school, I actually decided to apply to USC Film School and got in. But at that time, you know, I didn't understand that I could like emancipate myself from my parents and whatever. But my dad said he wouldn't sign the financial aid papers, and like he wouldn't support me going to film school because he wanted me to be a computer programmer. And again, I listened to him. You know, it's like I was a really good boy. I was from Minnesota. I grew up in, you know, the middle of nowhere in Minnesota, and I just listened to these people, and I didn't follow my own gut. On one hand, it was okay because acting took me then to New Mexico State University, and which seems like an unlikely place to go study theater. But at the time, the head of the theater program was a man by the name of Mark Medoff, who anybody that knows playwriting, anybody that knows movie, I mean, his Academy Award nomination was for adapting his, you know, play Children of a Lesser God to a movie with William Hurt and Marlee Matlin, who won the Oscar for that. He had won a Tony Award for that. And believe it or not, like New Mexico State was like one of the hottest theater schools in the nation. And I didn't go there because I knew that. I went there because my parents moved to New Mexico and I was a good boy, right? And I followed along. And it just so happened I fell into this place. And so, but I was an actor, you know, it's like I was sticking with this thing that I knew. But it's so funny because writing was always there. Writing was always there for me. And it's like I would do these things that would require me to write. And like at times people would be like, this is really good. And I was like, no, it's not good because I'm a terrible writer. You know, it's like that voice was still in my head. And I would write another thing. In fact, it's funny because I remember my directing class, my advanced directing class, like everybody else was doing existing plays. And for some reason, I decided to do an adaptation, not of the movie, but of the book, Altered States. I wrote a one-act play adapted from the book Altered States, a 2-character play. And like everybody was like blown away by it. And I was like, nah, I'm a terrible writer. It's not that, you know, it's like I still didn't even believe it. And so the first time that I realized that maybe I was wrong and that everybody was wrong and I shouldn't have listened to them was actually Mark Medoff. And so much of my Hollywood story, he was like a second father to me and was a great mentor. And so much of the good stuff that's come to me in Hollywood is all tied back to him. And he was the first person. We were in a play together and we shared a dressing room. And he said to me, you know, you're a writer, right? And, you know, and when a Tony Award-winning playwright tells you that, it finally sinks in. You know, and then I wish I could tell you that I immediately went and started writing, and that's the end of the story. But, you know, but I kept walking away from it because I think I was afraid of it. And so fast forward to my mid-20s, and I had left college, got married, had kids by this time, was living back in Minnesota, and just lost. And a friend of my really good friend from childhood, we decided that we would start trying to do things. But even at that time, it's still that voice of, you're not a very good writer. You're not a very good writer, like kept on coming back to me. And so, you know, I let him do all the heavy lifting, except for I started realizing like he was really good at coming up with ideas. But then when the script would be written, like I was really good at polishing it. And so like there was some cognitive dissonance there. But I still thought that I wasn't very good at coming up with ideas. But so the bottom line is like we got like this close to getting a show off or on the air, off the ground. And that show was not a narrative show. It was scripted, but it wasn't fictionalized. We were going to do a like a Entertainment Tonight for science fiction show based on, if there's any science fiction nerds out there, based on a popular magazine for nerds in the 70s and 80s called Starlog. Mm-hmm. And so we were Starlog, the science fiction universe. We had George Takei and Jimmy Doohan attached to be co-hosts, and it almost got off the air, or got on the air, right? At the same time, my first wife was diagnosed with cancer, and I didn't have health insurance, and cancer was really expensive. And so I just had to, kind of stop that and get a full-time job. I wish I could just blame that though on my stopping writing for another almost 12 years. But like, if I'm, it's just between us and everybody listening, I was secretly relieved because I was still worried that I was terrible at this. And, and again, I guess my story is eventually I found the courage because I didn't have it for so long, and that voice in my head never went away. And so for the next 10 years, I worked a corporate job. I actually really liked my corporate job. I made a lot of money, which was good because cancer was really expensive. But about 7 years into it, I remember a friend of mine, his first movie, he shot his first movie, and had all these mutual friends of ours saying, we always thought that was going to be you. And so it turns out that jealousy trumps everything else. And I finally said to myself, shit, I got to do it. I can't worry about it anymore. I just got to do it. And so Runaway actually started happening because I'd gone to Dov Simmons 2-day film school, if anybody knows that. And
I went to the Dov Simmons 2
did
days.
you? Oh my God.
Yes,
did he talk about the Seattle Film Festival during the time you went there? He like the time I was there, he kept on talking all weekend about the Seattle Film Festival. So my dream was, I had a little bit of money for my job, and that was the time of mini DV. Remember that time? Yeah. And I was going to take $25,000 and shoot and make a movie with a dream of getting it into the Seattle Film Festival, and like that would somehow launch my career. I have no idea why I thought that was, but he inspired me. So thank you, Dov Simmons, if you're still out there. Thank you.
I will say something for Dov Simmons. I was in film school at the time that I went to Dov Simmons, and in 2 days, he clarified a lot of stuff for me. He talks about the stuff that, they don't talk about in film school.
Yeah, so. I think at the time it was like $200, and I still think it's the best $200 I've spent. Yeah. I really do feel like it was really like going to film school, and I learned to talk. That was my real introduction to the business of it, and was eye-opening for me too. And certainly at the time, I think about the opportunities for screenwriting and film education now, and they just weren't there. Like, some guy coming to your town doing a 2-day film school is as good as it gets, So anyway, I had actually, this is how much I didn't believe in myself as a writer yet, though. I actually was going to hire another friend of mine and give him $2,000 to write me a script. And he didn't come through. And so finally, at the same time, I had been writing short stories, and not showing them to anyone. Except for I started showing them to a couple of my friends, and they were like, these are friggin' amazing, it's like, and I was like, I don't know, suddenly, I got the memo. It's like, maybe I'm not as bad, and this is all I was willing to say, Lavender. Maybe I'm not as bad as I think I am, And so I decided that I would take a short story and I would adapt it. And it was my favorite short story called Michael's Letters. And, you probably recognize that because the main character in Runaway is Michael, and he writes letters. So Runaway is Michael's letters as a movie. And like you say, so I wrote a bunch of versions of the script, and I finally started meeting people in the industry, and I got it to a certain point, and I started showing it around to these friends that I was making in the industry, telling them what my plan was. And I'll never forget two friends of mine, actually, but this one friend of mine very delicately said, stop it. This plan that you have to shoot this, to direct this yourself, please stop immediately. You will fuck it up. Like, this script is too, you're really onto something. This script is too good for you to mess it up.
What a great and brutal thing to say.
Yeah. I know. I was really mad, actually, in the moment. I was like, but then I talked to a second friend of mine who's in the industry. He's like, no, you're totally right. You're going to fuck that one up. It's like, this deserves more than you can give it right now. And so I had never heard of, no, I take that back. I had heard of the Nickel because I've been still friends with her, but I was an online friend back in the Genie screenwriting bulletin board service with Max Adams. And I was there online with her the day that she won the Nickels. And so that was really cool. So I knew the thing, but so I entered it in the Nickel, and actually I drafted the script that I wasn't particularly happy with. but it ended up placing in the top 100. And from there, kind of the rest was history. That you know, I found this great product. Well, actually, it's a great production company found me because they, you know, the semifinalists got, you know, they send out log lines of the movies or the scripts, and so Filbert Productions found me. I got them the script on a Thursday. By the next Tuesday, I got a call from who's now my very dear friend Al Klingenstein, who was the principal of Filbert Steps, and I'll never forget. I was on a site visit. I worked for a company called Express Scripts. I was on a site visit in St. Louis, and I get this phone call from this, you know, New York area code, and I like we were too stupid not to take it because, you know, we didn't understand spam calls yet. So I took it, and he's like, "This is Al Klingenstein." I was like, I didn't know who Al Klingenstein was, but he finally explained who he was, and he was like, "We're going to make your movie."
Wow.
And I was like, "What?" He said, "Actually, this is kind of interesting." He said, "Everybody in the office has read it. I'm only on page 25, but I'll finish it today. But we already know that it's the next movie."
Wow.
Yeah, and you know, imagine not being home. Like you're you know, you're in some other town, and some, you know, it's like, woohoo. You know, it's just this crazy thing. And you know, and the rest is history. A year and a half later, we were in the Catskills shooting it. I got to spend this rock star summer, you know, beforehand in pre-production in New York City. And we premiered the following spring at Tribeca. And that was an amazing experience. Went from there to Toronto. Actually, Austin was the third film festival we were in, was actually the only film festival we were in competition. And so that's one of the reasons why I was super proud, not to mention that Austin's a Screenwriters Award, but, you know, but I got our, you know, I was able to, you know, like feel like I helped get our win, you know, and our big film festival win. And that's kind of what launched my career. And it's, you know, I wish I could even say at that time, I was sure that I was a good enough writer, you know, but the thing that I had finally done is had the courage to buck the voice in my head, you know, the courage to push back on those years of other people speaking in my ear, telling me I couldn't do something. And, you know, and really finally being a little bit of a rebel and saying, screw that, I'm going to do it anyway. You know, but I think part of it is I also believe that like writing was this innate thing, like you either had it or you didn't. Like I didn't understand the notion of talent, you know, and what talent really was. I didn't really realize that talent is like, you know, 1% God-given ability and 99% practice, you know, and when I finally started understanding, if I just keep doing this enough, I'm going to get better at it. You know, that helped me. When I had enough courage to just start doing it, not worrying if I wasn't good at it yet, and just keep doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it, that eventually I would get better at it. I think that's what finally sold me on the idea that I might be good enough, you know, to have a career in this. And I'm glad that I stopped listening to the old me and started listening to the new me, because that was in 2004, 2005, and now it's 2022. And, you know, for nearly the last 20 years, I've made my living as a writer, you know, and either directly as a writer in, you know, either selling things or optioning things or getting jobs, or, you know, about 10 years ago, as you know, I fell into magically this position where I get to teach screenwriting. And so, you know, I'm just, not to sound sappy, but I feel blessed every day, because that old idea that you don't work a day in your life if you love what you do. You know, I work all the time, but I don't work a day in my life because I finally get to do this. The 3-year-old in me is so happy because I'm a story maker, you know, and it's all because I finally stopped listening to the voice in my head and everybody else and started trusting the process.
No, that's a beautiful story. I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people. You know, I had very similar kind of scenario. I'm Indian. You're not supposed to go into the arts. You know,
you're supposed to be a good boy and be a doctor or a lawyer, right?
My siblings are lawyers and MBAs and PhDs, you know, And I'm
Yeah.
just like, yeah, I'm going to go to film school. And, I even remember the moment. I was an engineering major for 3.5 years, and I'd worked at some companies. And after I graduated, even though I changed my major, but I still graduated, this one engineering company hired me. And, I'm in my early 20s making a ridiculous amount of money. This is back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And so much money I couldn't even spend it because I was working 70, 80 hours a week, and I
Yeah.
didn't have time to spend it. And I remember I was sitting in my room and I'm like, okay, well, making money doesn't seem nearly as hard as it thought it would be. You know what I mean? I think I can make
Yeah.
money. And
Yeah.
I'm like, but why am I not happy?
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing all the stuff you're supposed to do. You're supposed to work hard, and you're supposed to get a good job, and you're supposed
Yeah.
to make
Yeah.
money. And there's only one thing missing from my equation, and that was, happiness.
Right. Right.
Like, all right, well, if this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing, what am I supposed to be doing? Sitting at a desk in my apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I looked around my desk, and there were like 8 movie magazines and screenwriting magazines.
You're like,
I looked on the wall, and there's all these movie posters everywhere. And I looked on my bookshelf, and there's like 40 books on filmmaking and
somebody
directing.
send me a sign.
Yeah. It was one of those duh, kind of
Yeah.
moments in my life.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
It's like that old joke, the guys on the roof during the flood, and the floods, coming out there, and and like this and he's like, God's gonna save me, right? And like this, a guy in a rowboat comes up, and the guy's like, no, God's gonna save me, right? And then a guy in a speedboat comes up, no, God's gonna save me. The guy in a helicopter shows up, and he's like, no, God's gonna save me. And like the guy drowns, and he gets up to God, and he's like, why didn't you save me? He's like, what do you mean? I sent a rowboat, a speedboat, and a helicopter. It's like you've got all these signs around you. That's hilarious.
I've never bragged about being the sharpest tool in the shed, but even then I was looking around going,
Well, and part of it, and listen, I mean, I know in my own story, if I would have been a little sharper, I probably could have gotten a 15 or 20-year head start, but as it was, Runaway didn't premiere at Tribeca until just before my 40th birthday. So that's like one of the reasons I say, like, if I did it all wrong. I started so late, not really, but really, and like that's probably the only, I don't know, regret. I don't believe in regret like that, but sometimes I think like, oh, I could have had like another 15 years or so of of productivity in writing if I would have just not listened to that. But woulda, shoulda, coulda, right? I had a lot of life, and like you, I didn't hate my corporate job. I made a really good living, but I'll tell you, the thing that finally happened to me was they had offered me to be the vice president of call center operations for this company, and which was going to come with a huge, like double my salary or more. And but I would have to move to St. Louis, and then they would rightfully own me. They should have, and not, and if I really wanted to have that life, that was my version of of your thing. And it was literally at the same time that my friends were saying, we always thought you were going to do this other thing. And that was my wake-up call. It's like, oh, that was my rowboat or lifeboat or helicopter, and I finally, like you did with your magazines, I finally was smart enough to go, oh, you're trying to tell me something, aren't you? And thank God we finally got the message.
Yeah.
It's
never easy, because you're in the situation where you're getting paid well. If you stay the course, you're going to make a lot of money. You're not going to worry about, the bills and things and all the stuff that we're told we have to worry about in our lives.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to have nice things, but the cost of that is you just can't be happy in your career.
Right. Yes. I'm a big one. Like, we make our happiness, but I know what you're saying. It's like, I'm doing what I'm doing what I should be doing. I don't believe in passion, but I do believe in callings. And I believe that I was called to do this, and which, and I was out of sync with my calling before. which meant that life was really difficult, you know, because and I think one of the necessary side effects of that is dissatisfaction and unhappiness, you know. And finally, I feel even more than happy, I feel at peace. And but that said, I always tell people, you know, I became a professional screenwriter, and then my problems really started. You know, it's like the thing is like, you know, you get to that level where you sell something, it gets made, you know, it's like, oh my God, you know, then by that time I quit my job, you know, and I had to, you know, I had to, what do they say, eat what I kill, you know. It's like, then I was just like, holy crap, this is all I have. And boy, did I run through my savings fast, you know. And so that became even a more interesting journey because I think one of the things that a lot of new writers, I mean, I don't believe in calling people aspiring writers. You know, you're a writer or you're not a writer, and so I call them new writers. You know, and so I think a lot of new writers that are looking for their breakthrough, you know, I think that one of the mistakes that I made that I think people make is that I keep thinking about being a professional as a destination. It's like, oh, once I get there, it'll all be okay. You know, and I got there, you know, and like nothing was okay, you know, but I mean, in the end, it's okay because it's not the destination. It's really the journey that you're on. It's the writer's life, you know. But I think that that's one of the things that people think then is like, okay, well, you know, think about everything you went through, Lavinder, just to get to that point where you made that decision. And then you think, oh, well, that's now I'm done with my troubles. Or, okay, if I just get the sale, if I just get this thing, then I'll have crossed the line and all my troubles will be done.
Yeah.
You know, and the thing that I've learned over, you know, now nearly 20 years in this is like, you know, that there is no magic line. You know, you better be in it. You better love this life because it's, you know, I don't want to say hard, but it has its difficulty. You know, it's a challenge.
Yeah. No,
you know,
I will concur wholeheartedly. I just kind of had, even in the last 10 years, you know, I've known you more than that. I've had to kind of struggle and get back into it. I think I left writing in filmmaking in general for about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Because, you know, a couple different things. And I'll ask you about this question in a bit, but when I teach, I kind of give so much of my love and passion for screenwriting to my students. It's really hard to write on your own, you know, to maintain that juju, if you will.
Right.
And so that was something that slowed down my writing. But then, you know, you get caught up into other things, family and children.
Yeah. Well, we're both parents, we're both married, you know, and on top of that, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's always something else, right? You know, claiming your time and attention but your soul energy too, which is your creative energy, you know.
And, you know, one of the odd things that worked out because of the pandemic for me is I, for the first time in years, had free time.
Yeah.
And that's what, you know, that's what actually got me started writing again.
Yeah.
And
silver linings, I call them silver linings of the pandemic, you know.
And so, you know, in the past 2 years since that, you know, of my podcast, which you're obviously familiar with, my book, which did really well,
which I loved.
Thank you. And my, you know, made a movie last year that I directed, wrote a movie that just got filmed, you know, just kind of got it rolling again. And you know, couldn't be happier about it. And so yeah, that's been a big shift for me. So it's not just that first trying to get started in doing it. I had made multiple, you know, half a dozen movies.
I know. Yeah, exactly. Well, I think living the life of a writer, I mean, for one thing, I mean, just talking about the industry for a second, I mean, A-list screenwriter friends of mine, I mean, will tell you, you know, like, have you broken in? Have you broken? They're like, what? You know, I'm always breaking in. I'm always trying to, you know, trying to keep it together. I'm always trying to get the next job. I'm always trying to get the next thing. And I think that that's one of the things that people have to realize they're signing up for. It's like, I think there are some people that I know that it's like, they're like, oh my God, how hard do I have to work? And you know, and it's like they have a limit to how much work they're like willing to do. And then it's like, and it better get easy after that. And I'm just like, you're never going to do it because the work never stops. And it actually only gets kind of, in some respects, harder, but you get used to it. because you've been in this life for a long time, and with practice, not just practice in writing, but practice being in this mode, right? Practice being in, in the writing life. You get used to the things that you need to do to maintain it and grow it, and not just grow your life, but grow your practice and your business and your creative output and what have you. And I think that's where I've gotten in time, and that's been, I think that's been one of the greatest gifts that it's given to me, is just kind of this ability to, to just keep going and realize it's okay that the work never stops. And really, as much as I don't like the difficulty never stops, because the challenge is, I'm 57 and I don't feel like an absolute beginner, but I still feel like I'm just getting started. Yeah. When so many of my friends that I graduated high school with seem like they're getting ready to die, and I'm just getting ready for the next act.
Right.
It's like, so what's kind of cool about it is I think, the fact that the troubles never stop is really a great gift to us, because it means that we're always in the hunt, we're always in the game. And I don't know, there's just something cool about that for me,
No,
but listen, I'm with you, because this is how dumb I am. I didn't just want to try to break through once. I decided that I should try to break through twice. And what I mean by that is, when I first after Runaway, see, the whole idea about Runaway was, I thought that what I was going to use it for was to be a really good writing sample. So I could, because I really didn't want to write features. I wanted to write television. And so it was going to be my like, I do everything backwards, right? Everybody wants to start TV and go to movies. Not me, baby. I'm going to start TV, go to movies. I'm start movies, go to TV. But because my wife had passed away and I lived in Minneapolis, I couldn't move to California and be a TV writer. So I stayed in the feature space, and I was really fortunate because I got work, and I was, nothing else got made, but I did get to the point where my second movie got greenlit and then got ungreenlit, but I was able to get paid over time. And, the writer's strike in 2008 were hard, but I was able to battle back from them finally. And finally in 2012, I got the best job that I had ever gotten. By the way, a movie that still hasn't been made, but, it was kind of the turning point for me, that movie, by the way, has almost been made 6 times. That could be a podcast in and of itself. But by that time, my wife, now Lori, and I had reconnected because we had dated in college, and we reconnected. That's why I live in Phoenix, not LA, because I was on my way to LA and I reconnected with her. But I decided finally, after this big job, and I started teaching at Scottsdale Community College, where I teach now, just as an adjunct at that time. And so the two things that are dangerous for a writer, time and money. And I said, the whole dream was to write for television. So at the tender age of 48, I decided to scrap my, my hard-earned future career that was just taking off, and start back at the beginning to write for television. And, and that was an interesting journey, because somebody told me, like, and they really were at that time, especially, they were such different industries. And I didn't start from square one, but I started from like 1.5. And I just had to do the thing that we tell everybody to do all the time. I had to write a bunch of TV pilots. And so in some respects, I didn't have an option to not, just practice. And like, I didn't have an option to say I'm too tired, or I can't, it was just because I was back at the beginning. It's like, oh, holy shit, I'm 58 or 48. If I don't do this now, if I don't just buckle down, and I got really exhausted doing it, but I wrote like 8 or 9 TV pilots within like 3 or 4 years, and that, but it's really cool because I'm kind of standing on the precipice of some really cool things happening in television. But that's how dumb I am. And I'm deciding to listen, breaking through once isn't enough for me. I'm going to try to break through twice. I'll let me start at the beginning again. And I'm really fortunate now, because the feature and the television world are kind of converging again, and so I'm able to kind of go back and work in both. And I've said some, I have friends that remember me from my feature days that have been, kind to me in the past couple of years. But, anyway, it's, I understand what you're saying though, about stopping out. I don't know, just for me, it's been, I think because I went back and I was a beginner again in trying to, break into television. And it's different when you're 48 because nobody wants you to get them coffee. So you can't go up the normal way through TV by being a writer's PA and writer's assistant and what have you. You'd have to sell something, which is virtually impossible. I mean, it's virtually impossible to sell a movie script. It's virtually impossible, to sell a TV show. And but I apparently by that time I didn't get the memo. And and so I just decided, why not me? I can be the one in a million, and that I think is the thing that helped me more than anything, just stay on task. And it was exciting too because I got to learn a new form of writing, and I think that that's the thing that in spite of all the business, because I know exactly what you're talking about, the reason why you stopped out. And I think the thing that saved me in a way is because I was working in this new form of writing. I had the excitement of it, but it was like the ticking clock of I gotta do as much as I can now because I'm gonna be 50 soon, and I've got to try to get something going, before I'm just completely aged out of it. I don't really believe you can get aged out of it anymore, but that's what I thought at that time.
Right. No, I mean, one of the fascinating things I think that you bring, especially to your teaching, is you're actively in it.
Yeah.
And you're teaching it. I think most of the time, most of the people that teach are kind of, not doing it full time, and it's something they did. It's something that you do. How does that incorporate into, when you're talking to your students?
It incorporates, like, if I was a screenwriting student, I would want me as my teacher, and because
even if you do say so yourself.
Even I do say so myself. No, but part of it is because it's because of that. It's like I understand what you're saying, and there's nothing wrong with writing teachers that just teach. But screenwriting is, it's show business. And the business has changed a lot in the past 20 years. And it's also like the Matrix. If you've never been in it, and if you're not in it, I can describe it to you, but you really don't understand it because it's so counterintuitive. So the reason why I would want me as my screenwriting teacher, and I tell my students or prospective students this all the time, when I'm talking about what's going into Hollywood, I literally mean the conversation I had earlier today. I literally mean the meetings I'm having, every day of the week. And so I think one of the things that I bring is, that knowledge of industry, but also the reason why we're writing it. It's like you're not writing this to put in a drawer somewhere and never show anybody. You're writing this for the idea that you're trying to build a career. You're trying to answer the call. You're trying to get into the industry. You're trying to break in somehow. And so I think one of the things that it does is it helps me guide, new writers to do the things that they need to do in order to be viable, right? To actually, and I would say, being a screenwriter is like being an Olympic athlete. There's millions and millions of athletes in the world, and a mere 3,000 or 4,000 of them get to the Olympic Village. That's not even talking about who gets into the finals, much less the medal round.
Right.
And so, you've got to work really hard, and you've got to be that good. You've got to be that practiced in order to get to the Olympic Village. And that's just the starting point. Then becomes the start of your journey, right? Your professional journey. Now I've gone on the playing field. That's the joke about now my problems really begin because I'm a professional grade screenwriter. And so I think that's one of the things that I bring to it. But also, I tell people I'm a blue collar screenwriter and I'm a blue collar screenwriting teacher. And what I mean by that is that obviously you and I have a very strong connection with and between us about what story is and how movies convey story, and why that's important. But the other thing that I think is that I bring to the table is, I don't teach screenwriting as a merely academic pursuit, right? And that not only shows through in understanding about the industry, but also in the way that I talk about the craft, the way that I present the craft to people, and the way that I talk about movies, and the way that I talk about being a creator of experience, instead of merely being a teacher that talks about how to assemble a plot. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Or to spin a yarn on the page, which I think people that don't have the same kind of experience that you and I do, I think that's the way it's an intellectual esoteric pursuit to them. And for me, it's very real. It's very nuts and bolts. It's very tangible. And I start with that from the first class that you ever take from me. I'm literally the first class session of the first class that you ever take from me. And because I think and it also helps because I teach at a community college, which means that we're an occupational program. So we have that focus anyway. Like there has to be some sort of portability to a profession there. And I love that. Not that I wouldn't teach at an academic program, but I love that the focus is always, how might I make a living at this? How might I make a life at this? I don't know if that answers your question, but that's why I love it and how I think it matters.
Absolutely. I think that one of the great things is having that balance. I remember I was teaching at East Carolina University, and there was a PhD who was in charge of our program. And nothing against them, but they had gone to undergrad, got their master's, got their PhD, and then started teaching full time.
Yeah.
And at no point anywhere was there any actual professional experience. And one day we were in the TV studio working on something, and we walked in, and he was standing there with the owner's manual next to one of the consoles, and like, why isn't this cable connected to this? Because this is in the book. And I took the book and I slammed it, like, well, last week when we were using this, that didn't work, so we had to,
Right. It's like in the screenwriting version of that is, I mean, the people that are on the outside and haven't waken up in the Matrix, right, and haven't walked around in the Matrix. They care about things that people in the Matrix don't really care about, and that's part of it. So I know one of the things that, as I'm talking to my students, it's like I disavow a lot of, it's like, don't fucking worry about that, because it really doesn't matter. I mean, we can talk about things if we just want to have fun talking about things, but if you want to focus on, what real screenwriting is, what the job is and what the craft is and what the business is, let's dispense with it. I mean, like, I don't really care if you bold your slug lines or not. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't care about ellipses. I don't care about double M. I never met an ellipsis I didn't like. I never met double M dashes I didn't love, in a script. And I don't bold my slug lines. Does that mean I can't be a professional screenwriter? And I joke and I say, all the people that have paid me didn't care. What they cared was I was able to convey a really cool experience through story, a really cool movie or TV experience through story that made them fall in love with the world, the characters, the plot, the whatever, so much so that they wanted to move forward with it. Again, I'm not crapping on anybody that bolds their slug lines, but I'm just saying, that's an example of the things that the pros, like on writer Twitter, are trying to tell everybody every day, all the time. It doesn't matter. That's the wrong conversation to be even having. There are plenty of other much more important conversations. And if I can plug your book really quick, that are the conversations that Scriptcake Secrets are talking about. Meaning, are you paying attention to, how to convey a moving journey? Are you paying attention to how to move people's souls and hearts and create an emotional journey for, it's like, that's, if we want to argue on Twitter about something or argue about something we should be arguing about that, and so, like, that's an example of it, just because I get frustrated about the formatting conversations on Twitter, I guess. But I just think that that's one of the things that it's important to do, is to talk about the real thing. And when you have somebody that's in the industry, a writing teacher that writes, I think that that's what you get. And I love one of my favorite things in the world is to share my journey with my students. I mean, another thing that I believe is I think that writing teachers should not be afraid to read their own stuff in class, and share the journeys, the highs and the lows and everything in between. In fact, there was one time because I had a bunch of, I was teaching a TV pilot class, and these students were freaking out because they were reading like finished pilots by, that I was assigning by, pro writers. But, these are things that had gone through the producer, studio, network process, right? And they were getting really worried because they were like, I'll never write this well. And I was like, well, you're going to get a first draft in this class. So I was driving to class one day, and I had literally just typed end of episode on a first draft of, I hadn't even read it yet. Mm-hmm. Okay, the night before. I drove to class and I was like, we're going to read my script today. You're going to understand just how, I haven't read this, but I think that's a cool thing to do too. It's like, it's for people to understand, oh, my stuff sucks too when it's the first draft. So.
Did I ever tell you the story of how I got over myself in my first drafts?
No.
So I was in this cycle of just being this perfectionist.
Yeah.
Just writing a sentence
right
100 times.
Oh my God.
Getting the verbiage
sculpted beautifully.
Oh yeah. And then as soon as I wrote the next sentence, I had to go back and rewrite the previous sentence because
right. Yeah.
And it was just this kind of never-ending cycle of wasting my own time. I don't know how I came across this. There's a book by Anne Lamott called Bird by Bird. Have you ever read that? Okay. Well, there's a chapter in there that just kind of completely changed my outlook. And the name of the chapter is called Writing Shitty First Drafts. And
I sent you a rowboat, a speedboat, and a
helicopter. And so in it, she goes, the purpose of a first draft is to write a shitty first draft. Mm-hmm. And if you are attempting to do anything beyond that, you are not pursuing what you should pursue along the journey of writing a first draft. The point of it all is to write fade to black. That's it.
Yeah. It's funny because the terminology that I've started using over the past couple of years with my students is the purpose of a first draft is to complete a thought. You have a thought about something and you're trying to complete this thought. And part of it is because I'm a little woo-woo. And so like, I don't know, like, I think it's okay to talk about first drafts sucking and shitty first drafts and whatever, but it's like, I don't know, it's like, I don't want to bring that energy to it, because I want to celebrate the idea of a first, but I don't want people, I know what you mean. I don't want people to get stuck on this idea that it has to be perfect.
Let me explain what I mean by that is it just freed me up.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. Right.
I knew for a fact, if there's anything in this world I could do,
is write something shitty. No, but I think you're absolutely right. But yes, the positive side of that is by embracing that is you release yourself from the responsibility of being a perfectionist, or the responsibility of endless editing, in draft, and just understand what the real process is, which is just to complete a thought, right? I'm just trying to get this thing out. And that's, and that's my version of it's a shitty first draft, because you can tell people real writing is rewriting, but they don't get it until they understand just what you're talking about, that it's okay that it's not good. It's okay because that you're not trying to make, that's what I tell my students. You're not trying to make it good. You're just trying to complete a thought. Mm-hmm. You're just trying to get it out. And if you can just get it out, then you can take it. Then you've thrown the clay on the wheel, right? And you've made it basically in the shape of a bowl, but now the real work starts, and you shape it into a vase or a coffee cup or another bowl, right? It's like you then that's when you start making it pretty. And so I that makes perfect sense that that's what resonated with you, because I think it's right. I think, as soon as you can embrace the idea that It's okay for things to be shitty. It's okay for, the other thing that I tell people too is it's okay to be a beginner. I wish I had somebody like us to tell me that in the beginning too, because what I realized that what I didn't have was has somebody to tell me way, way, way back when, you're not a good writer, ... yet. I didn't have the ... yet.
Yeah.
And so I thought that meant that either you had it or you didn't. And I think one of the other things that people get stuck on is this idea that I have to be good at this out of the chute, because they don't realize that that's not how it works. That it, like any other craft, you get better with practice. And that was the thing that for years and years I didn't allow myself. They'd say, oh, how do you get better? You're right. I didn't allow myself, the ability to just write shit until I finally realized, till my brain was making connections with my fingers, and I started understanding structure and internalizing it, right? And understood my own process and understood how I get into, it's like I didn't have that opportunity. And I didn't get there through inspiration. I got through there from planting my butt in the seat and just working through the horrible, shitty first drafts, right? And the struggling with subsequent drafts. And I think that's another thing that people get stuck on, is they don't realize it's okay. Everybody's bad at it in the beginning. And I tell my students all the time, because they're always like, are your first drafts this bad? I was like, not now, because I've been doing this for 20 years. My first drafts some of them are really bad, but it's like, I've been doing this and I've internalized this enough that, my first drafts have more finesse to them at the very least, but they're probably structurally more intact than a beginner's is going to be, just because I understand my own process. I in my head can put together a lot of the pieces that you as a beginner can't put together yet, because you haven't internalized structure and the process and story and the emotion of it and theme, and are able to kind of in second nature kind of put the pieces together like somebody who's been doing it for 20 years, but I think that's the other thing, that why it was good for you to read that chapter, because by getting over that, you actually gave yourself the gift of practice, of allowing yourself to practice and repetition. It was why not just because I got the advice of it, but that I knew the advice was true, that if I really wanted to be a TV writer and I needed to be on fast forward, that's all I needed to do for the next 3 to 5 years is literally just write pilot after pilot after pilot after pilot after pilot, so I could get really good, so I could internalize what TV is, because it's different than movies, and I think it's harder in many respects, and I think that I think that that's what I needed in order to become I mean at least a pro level TV writer. The people that I'm working with think I'm okay. So I think that that's that's something that by getting over that thing that you're talking about, that you allow yourself to do is to focus on the practice, because discipline doesn't mean punishment. Discipline means, right, Zen is a discipline. Zen doesn't mean nirvana. Zen means practice, and I think that that's the thing that people just need to allow themselves to do.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned clay, because that's just something that I mention to my students all the time. A first draft is writing. For me, it's a block of clay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
like you don't have any clay when you start.
Right.
So that first draft is clay.
Yeah.
And then you can take a chunk off and add it back somewhere else, or discard it. And that's where you start to shape and mold your story. Because at the end of the day, there's a dozen, maybe more layers per scene that exist as you're writing your way through. Who can keep all of those straight simultaneously from beginning to end in a first draft?
Not me.
Right. And so, I would say my first drafts are probably the equivalent of a 10th draft of 20 years ago.
Yeah, probably. I think for me too. And listen, sometimes on a first draft, like we all do, my students are asking me, like, how many drafts do I give something? It's like, I don't really know, but usually by the 5th, 6th, or 7th draft these days, like, it's getting to the point where I'm ready to go out to my trusted readers, and it might be, it might have been, enough that we can trust it to be ready, not always, but sometimes it's 20 drafts. I've got a feature script that I absolutely love that I've been working on for 2 years, and it's the 5th or 6th draft of it, and it's just not there yet, baby. It's close, but I probably need 2 or 3 more drafts just to wrap my head around all of the levels that I'm missing right now. But I've had scripts that virtually fade out. I said sometimes you get those $1 million babies, that it just comes out. I had a TV pilot that came out like that about 4 or 5 years ago. I had a feature that I wrote last summer, yeah, that came out that way. That it was like, but I think but then again, I laugh because I've also been thinking about this movie. Remember True Country?
Mm-hmm.
I was talking about that 10 years ago when you were living here.
Yeah, more than 10
Yeah,
years.
more than 10. and I couldn't crack it, So that's the other thing, is I say it was $1 million baby, and it was a draft and a half or 2 before it got to the point where it was just ready. But I'm not counting the idea that I've been thinking about it for 10, and I tried to outline it in 5 or 6 different forms, and it wasn't until a friend of mine was talking, that's a producer, was talking in my class, and as I was listening to her, suddenly it all went, it's like she said the thing that made me wonder about True Country.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, if I change the character, if I don't make that character me, like literally a dude, if I make it a woman and I do this and I do, it's like, just give myself a little distance. And then suddenly all of these plot elements that I've been talking to myself about for 10 years suddenly fell into place. I think I outlined the thing in another 3 weeks, and I wrote the first draft in 2.5 weeks. It was just one of those things that was lightning in a bottle. I did another draft and a half or so of it, and I started sending it to my trusted readers, and people were like, why aren't you sending this? It's like, that doesn't happen very often, but you're right. I think the idea of understanding the rewriting and all that process is important.
No, I have, both sides of the spectrum. I have scripts that I've literally written 20 or 30 drafts on.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
That go out, and some people like them, some people don't, and whatever. And then I've got at least 3 scripts where I sent first drafts out that got bought and made.
Yeah.
And it's like, really?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. Way back in the day, an agent I had at the time was with a very large agency, and at that time I'd given Runaway, which had just won, and because he got me a meeting with a showrunner, but he had also wanted to, he's like, what can I have, what can you show me that you've written? And I literally just typed one of those things. I typed fade out. I think I'd read it once, but I hadn't really fixed anything. But I had a printed copy in my car. This is when we were still doing printed copies. And I was like, I just wrote this thing, I'm not going to show you. He's like, I'm an agent, I can handle this.
Yeah.
So I gave it to him. And the meeting with the showrunner was 3 weeks later, and fortunately it worked, because he said, I liked your script. And I said, well, you mean the movie? And I said, they sent a movie. And I didn't watch a movie, I read a script. He knew, then he said the title of the script. Mm-hmm. And but by the way, that was the original version of Incarnation, just so you know. Yeah. And that was called The Angel and the Horse at the time. Terrible title. But he loved it. And so that was my, like, I dodged a bullet, because it's like, he like read this draft, and he was like just raving about all these parts of the script. And I was like desperately trying to remember, because I really hadn't read it, again. Yeah. It was just kind of funny, but I'm with you too. It's like, I've got scripts that I've worked on, for so many years. And that's the other thing that I think writers have to not be afraid to do, is just put it away. Put it away. I mean, because the thing is what else do you have to do with your life other than write, and keep writing a different thing and writing a new thing. And if something, you get stuck on something and you just can't figure it out, go on to another thing. Nothing, there's no harm, no foul at it. I think that's another trap that people get into, because they're like, I've got to finish this thing, and I've got to get it out, and I've got to get my manager or agent or producer, and I've got to get this made, or I've got to get this sold, and this one script is my one shot. And again, I think that putting the destination, instead of the journey, we've all done it, but I think it's just the wrong move because it creates desperation for one thing, and it's not conducive to creativity for another thing. And the other things is it tempts people to put substandard work out there. You've put it out there, I've put it out there. We all know the damage that substandard, I'll call it not ready work, can do for you. And part of it is like, I'm like you, I've been doing this long enough. I kind of know what my ready work looks like now, because that's through practice. But I have some very trusted readers that are all in the industry that I can send something and ask. I don't ask if it's good. I mean, I just ask, is it ready? Is this ready? Does this look like what you'd expect? And if you got notes, give me notes, right? But does it seem ready? And if they say no, then I'm like, well, what's not ready? Then we go through the process and I'll do another revision of it. But I think that, that can sometimes happen in the first draft, and it can sometimes not happen for years and years.